Good afternoon, distinguished panelists, participants and friends of Lestia Liberia. I'm Dakina Cooper. I'm the host of Lestia Liberia Monday Dialogue Series. On behalf of Lestia Liberia, I'm pleased to welcome you to the November edition. Today's section, Skill for the Future, Building Educational Pathways to Jobs, focuses on one of the most urgent national priorities, strengthening Liberia's skill ecosystem to respond to labor market demands and create meaningful opportunities for young people. The world of work is changing fast. Competency-based employment is becoming the standard, where what you can do matters more than what degree you hold. Yet, in many countries, it takes 16 to 18 years for a young person to complete a university education. Even at then, many graduates leave without the market required skills for employment or competency for self-employment. This is where technical and vocational education and training plays a transformative role. Consider this. An underwater welder can be 43 in just 2 to 3 years and earn between 80,000 to 120,000 annually, while an engineer may spend between 18 to 22 years to reach the same professional level, earning only 12,000 to 18,000 at the start. The contract is clear. Competency-based skills can fast-track employment, earnings, and impact. This webinar targets policymakers, educators, industrial leaders, training institution practitioners, and development partners. It comes at a time when Liberia is transitioning from policy formulation to implementation of the Liberian National Technical and Vocational Education and Training Qualification Framework. Today, we will explore how Liberia can operationalize TVET, link informal apprenticeship to formal training, integrate agriculture and sector-specific skills, and ensure post-training sustainability through advisory support and innovative financing. To achieve this, we are honored to have two exceptional thought leaders with us today. First, Honorable Laraman Shakin Newton. He's the Deputy Minister of TVET at the Ministry of Youth and Sports, Liberia. Honorable Minister, we appreciate your leadership in advancing the TVET agenda in Liberia and your continuing commitment to building strong institutional frameworks and youth skills system. We also have with us Ms. Sebel Ferris, an international TVET development expert with deep experience across Africa. Ms. Ferris, your extensive international experience in NQF, which is National Qualification Framework Design, RPL system, and informal apprenticeship reforms brings valuable perspective to our national conversation. We look forward to a rich practical conversation that will help shape Liberia's skills development architecture for the future. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we encourage you to share your questions throughout the section. We'll start this conversation by just 1 minute each with our two panelists, just an introduction statement, just 1 minute each.
Thank you very much, Dakina, and welcome everyone. I'm very honored to be here and participate in this very important webinar. Also very excited to share my experience and lessons learned by working in the TVET sector across Africa and implementing multiple and nuanced systems as it pertains to apprenticeships and the informal sector and how to modernize that. So I have over 20 years of experience in development and design of TVET systems from NQF level policy and implementation, as well as extending that to the labor market and ensuring that people not only find jobs, but also that they can be defined as decent jobs. So I'm very honored to be here and share my knowledge with you today. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you, Dakina.
Thank you very much, Sabah. So we don't have the minister. So I think we'll just jump into the conversation, Sabah, with the minister. John, I will revert to him. So if you are aware, Liberia have um, validated and completed its national framework qualifications. Uh, what nursing or what can ensure that TVET institution align curriculum with the competency standard defined by the national framework?
Thank you. And I think it's a very important question, Dakina. Many countries institutionalize a national qualifications framework and then it sits there. Not a lot of people are aware of its existence or its purpose. For to answer that question, I think, the policy objectives needs to be very clear for why we need to institutionalize a national qualifications framework and what the qualifications framework aims to achieve in terms of not only skills development, but its alignment to the labor market. And so I think, the first step is to create that awareness within the skills development sector and the key role players so that they understand, the purpose of the qualifications framework and how they can interact with it. And so I think to start off with, we need to understand that we cannot measure something unless it's standardized. And in order for us to standardize something, we need to look at it from the same angle. And the only way we can do that in skills development is by utilizing the qualifications framework as a standardization mechanism to look at what industry requires in terms of skills, competencies, and behaviorisms, and then develop our curriculum in terms of occupational profiles in accordance with what the industry requires. And then we need our TVET institutions to understand how to use that occupational profile as a benchmark for training and skills delivery within their institutions. And I think the last part is probably one of the most important one is getting TVET institutions to align to the national qualifications framework, to understand competency-based education and training, and how to use national occupational standards as a benchmark, not only for training delivery, but also for assessment and certification purposes. So we need to create that awareness, but we also need to build their capacity to understand and implement competency-based education and training in accordance with the national qualifications framework. And by building that capacity, we need to provide training of trainers so that the trainers that are currently within the system can understand how to implement competency-based education and training, also understand, how to participate in the development of those national occupational standards because they are considered to be experts in the field, not in terms of pedagogy, but in terms of their industry specific experience. And then also, we need to come up with indicators that will help us track implementation across different sectors and in terms of how the NSQ or the NQF is being implemented, because that monitoring and evaluation provides us with real-time data that can help us come up with a continuous professional development plan to support training institutions in implementing the national qualifications framework. So there are several steps involved, but the most important one is to identify and create awareness around the purpose of the NQF and then its implementation, but also to provide the supporting tools to TVET institutions to be and to enable them to implement the NQF as intended. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was extensive. So awareness and providing the tools to implement the national framework system, qualification system is important. Minister, we lost you a minute, so you just do 1 minute of introduction, and then you give us what practical steps are required to move the national framework, qualification framework from policy to nationwide implementation.
I wanted to thank you to uh my dear brother Dakina and all of the organizers. It's good to be here to talk about TVET and the space that we've been operating um in under 2 years since we took over. My name is Laraman Yonton. I am the current Deputy Minister for Technical Vocational Education and Training. here at the Ministry of Youth and Sports. I am also a graduate of the um, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, as well as the Akela University, where I study international peace and conflict resolution. Basically, to your question, I think the first level of practicality is to define clearly what we want as far as the national qualification framework. And we have developed that in the sense of the national TVET policy. So it's captured in Objective 3 of the national TVET policy, which aim to ensure that we have systematic classification and structure of skills development across the TVET ecosystem. I think once we are able to get all of these national stakeholders, whether it's private TVET or public TVET, meaning that TVET providers that are in the private space outweighs the number of government-run TVET institution. So the private sector play a critical role in getting to understand what is this all about. The flip side of what we have experienced over the years is that with the proliferation of private TVET institutions that are not properly arranged or organized, it makes it difficult to have kind of quality standard across all of the TVET institutions. So you find in places like New Time, for example, a small um, TVET institution with the goal of just giving back to the community, running programs for 3 months, 6 months, and you find national TVET institutions like the Monrovia Vocational Training Center running program for 18 months. Now, mind you, they may be offering electricity, for example, as a trade, as a course, as a trade area. And folks at MVDC is doing the same electricity, getting the same certification, but they are going for a much longer time, 18 months as opposed to 3 months or 4 months. So the quality standard aims to address that we have a uniform approach in terms of our TVET delivery and services across all spectrum, whether it's public TVET institution or private TVET providers. And I'm sure with the validation of the national TVET policy that runs between 2022 to 2027, we can address that. The second aspect of the practical step that is needed, and I think my sister Faris, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, touched on it a little bit, is to understand what employers are not asking for. So we need to be real practical in a sense. Hello, are you getting me?
Yes, so
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So we need to focus a shift a little bit in terms of data and science. So data is the new oil. Most of the data that we used in Liberia at the level of TVET data that's spent over the last 6 to 7 years. They are old. All right. So we are not using new information. We are not quoting. I think a practical step towards ensuring that we have quality and we have the kind of skill set that employers are actually looking for is to do a comprehensive nationwide national TVET gap analysis and labor market demand study. So one front, we have TVET institutions that are already putting out graduates. The measure of those institutions should not be the number of graduates they are putting out. It should be about the number of jobs that are created as the result of those students that got out. So with that gap analysis, we are able to measure 6 months down the line, a follow-up mechanism, 6 months down the line, how many students, say MVDC graduated 1,410 students in the last graduation. 6 months down the line, how many of those 1,400 students have been able to actually land a job? And of that number, how many of them took the pathway, the entrepreneurship pathway, right? To create their own job and sustain themselves. So once we're able to critically look at TVET in terms of the quality standard that is needed within that space, we can do that gap analysis. Even the teachers that are now before our students, what are the qualifications? How many years have they been teaching? Have they gone to the National TVET Institute that was established in 2018? Are we making it mandatory for them to go there and acquire TVET pedagogical skills before standing before the classroom? These are things that we need. On the flip side, the labor market demand study is very essential. You have a whole host of construction companies. I was in Bowman County quite recently, and
Mm-hmm.
the citizens there had invited me to let me know that they have a land, they have a building, and they wanted us to take TVET in that part of the country. All right. And they told me that they have quite a few concession companies like B Mountain and the rest of those folks, but they are telling them that they do not have, the young people do not have the skill set to get entry-level job at these concession companies. So we need to engage more and more private sector, the construction company, agricultural company in different spheres of different growth production sector that align with TVET and ask them, what are the list of entry-level jobs you're looking for, or skill set that you're looking for? And how can we work and partner with you to be able to supply those skill sets? Once we are able to do that, I'm telling you from a policy end, we are able to now have solid empirical data on TVET in terms of where the gaps are, what skill sets are needed in what sector, and we can plan between the next 3 to 5 years on where we want to see the TVET ecosystem. But I think that from a practical policy perspective, that's what is needed at this time.
So, Honorable Minister, one would say um, in the labor market, so there are two sides of the labor market: the supply of skills and the demand of skills. And the demand of skills to drive the kind of skill set that being produced by the country. So one would say, how is the TVET curriculum changing in terms of the kind of jobs being demanded by our industry? I know you say you do a gap analysis, but uh, the demand side should drive the skills supply. How do you reconcile that?
Well, so right now it stands at an imbalance, and I'll say this because we are still offering traditional TVET related um skills in areas like plumbing and and carpentry.
Yeah.
And the new outlook for TVET as far as job creation, right, needs to move a little bit, a step further than that. The introduction of things like AI, most of our TV institutions that are, for example, that are offering computer
Hmm.
studies, they are offering basic computer studies, right? What about enhancing that into a specialized area, like cloud computation, like robotic, for example? We had quite a few of our students that went to China last year to participate in the world skills competition, even though they really did not perform, but at least the idea and the network that it built over time was very valuable to them. So that is the outlook that align with the new information age, particularly to take TVET. And that also aligns with the competent-based approach within the space, within the TVET ecosystem that we are now looking forward to. But at the moment, there's an imbalance in terms of demands that that are required, skill sets that are required from employers versus what we are actually putting out there. And you see that gap even with foreign companies that are coming into the country. They are bringing in expatriate workers and are
Hmm.
utilizing the skill sets that we have here because the skill sets that we have here really do not match the demands that we have. And this is one thing that as policymakers within the space, working with the Ministry of Labor and other institutions, we have to deal with very aggressively and intentionally so that our young people who are graduating from these institutions are now reoriented in a way that they have the kind of skill set that are required. But I tell you, most of our TVET folks that are
Mhm.
graduating are not looking for job. They are looking for startup incubation, startup um, small business for themselves to be able to sustain and themselves and sustain their livelihood.
Okay, so we'll circle back to you. Let me ask Sabel, right? Am I saying your name
Mhm.
right? Okay,
Sybil, yes.
okay. So let's look at the institutions, the teachers and instructors who are providing the training. How can they be trained in terms of aligning with the competency standard to roll out QF, the National
Mm.
Qualification of Framework? How can we
Yeah,
reach train teachers, and our instructors to roll out this competency standard?
Yeah, I think this is very much aligned to the first question you posed to me, Darkina, and it's
Mhm.
about developing implementation and supporting tools for the implementation of the NQF. And so when we are developing these national occupational standards or CBET qualifications, there are minimum trainer requirements, and the general requirement across the board in terms of competency-based education and training and its alignment to the NQF is that trainers must always be one level higher trained than the level that they are training on. So if you are a trainer for electrical level 3, then you must possess a level 4 national qualification. And so these are the minimum requirements or standards that Liberia would probably have to look at and determine what are the minimum requirements for TVET trainers within the different sectors. Sometimes it's better to do, and as opposed to taking a general blanket approach, to look at sector specific approaches, because what may count for one sector may not necessarily count for another sector. And that is where the industry alignment also plays a key role, because industry and especially organized private sector are very particular in terms of the type of skills that they want and the level at which they want it. And we need to ensure that our trainers at a bare minimum conform with industry requirements. And therefore, I say let's rather take a sector specific approach than generalize, although generalizing is an easier way for implementation purposes. But the sooner we start looking at sectors in their individuality and the nuances that comes with it, the sooner we align labor supply to labor demand, if we are talking about implementing a demand-driven training or TVET system. Then secondly, as part of the sub-organs of the National Qualifications Framework, we have to start looking at establishing industry skills committees. The function of these industry skills committees is to conduct labor market analysis and use labor market information systems to determine the skills needs for their specific sectors. And then from that, you develop sector skills development plans. So you'll have a sector skills development plan for agriculture, for digital and ICT, for banking, for engineering, whatever the case may be. For instance, this is a model that is implemented in South Africa, in Nigeria, as well as Namibia. And I think in Namibia, we have about 11 different industry skills committees, which represents all the sectors within the country. And so those sector skills development plans helps us to prioritize the skills needed for economic development. And then we can zoom in and use other existing trainers to support the development of occupational standards that are aligned to the needs as they are identified by the industry skills committees. So by merely participating in the development process, it is also a transfer of knowledge of how competency-based education and training works, but also recognizing their existing skill and giving them that recognition as people that will be pioneering the implementation of the NQF and competency-based education and training. Of course, we already spoke about developing supporting implementation tools. So together with that, we need to dedicate resources towards capacity building, and not just for trainers, but also for training institutions, because once we align to the labor market, you will see, or to industry requirements, you will see that it becomes very costly for TVET institutions to keep up to date with the trends of the industry. In terms of innovation development, etc. And so, we need to consider the capacity building implications of implementing competency-based education and training aligned to the NQF. And I think later on we will talk about apprenticeship being the most cost-effective model for implementing CVET and the NQF. But to answer the question, a dedicated training of trainers program needs to be established. It needs to be prioritized and, if possible, funded by the implementation organization or implementing agency for the NSQF, to ensure that trainers are trained and kept up to date with trends in terms of pedagogy as it aligns to competency-based education training. And in addition to that, the NSQF will have to also come with accreditation standards. Accreditation standards is minimum criteria that each institution must meet in order for them to offer a qualification that is registered on the NQF. And by implementing accreditation criteria or minimum requirements for institutions, we will also then look at how does that apply to a trainer in the different fields. And so trainer qualifications and requirements becomes part of an institution's accreditation compliance to the NQF. And so there are various modalities and quality assurance mechanisms that can be implemented at an implementation level as it pertains to TVET institutions getting accredited to offer NQF qualifications, trainers meeting qualification requirements to be able to train in a specific occupation, but then also looking at how do we monitor and evaluate, the progressive implementation of competency-based education and training. And therefore, I would suggest that, an M&E system be implemented to monitor the implementation of the NQF and identify key constraints in terms of the level of compliance of training providers and or trainers, assessors, and verifiers, to identify the key topics in which continuous professional development must be aligned towards to enable a smooth implementation and continuous implementation of the NQF. And so, in a nutshell, quality assurance tools and mechanisms from policy level up to implementation level needs to be considered and implemented for us to support trainers in the implementation of an NQF and competency-based education and training as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. So, Minister Yonton, we heard from Seba. So she talked about quality assurance from policy level all the way to implementation level. Now we are transitioning to implementation. What's the mechanism or the current mechanism to ensure quality assurance and performance audit of these institutions, our current institutions?
So I'll pick you back to the fact that Liberia, as far as the NQF, is an emergent kind of environment for us. Quite recently validated in 2022. And our national approach generally, as far as the evolution of TVET, is on a decade, okay? Taking back to the first national TVET policy, in which basically no movement took happen as far as implementation. So we are at the phase where we're still at the developmental stage. There haven't been a lot done in terms of ensuring that all of the validated, developed and validated curricula across TVET, which in Liberia currently there are 13 nationally validated curricula that we want to ensure is used across all TVET institutions. Um, and once we are able to do that, we are able now to properly also work with the Ministry of Education um, in terms of even licensing of these TVET institution, set a benchmark criteria for who, who enters and who exits into the space. Once that is done, we will be able to streamline and reduce the number of TVET providers in terms, or just deal with this whole um, negative effect of the proliferation of TVET institutions across the country. And those are practical conversations that we are having. We set up the Interministerial TVET task force, which is the highest policy decision-making body for all of the institutions that are related to TVET, the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Ministry of Education, and the Agriculture Industrial Training Bureau. So with that, we meet twice annually to ensure that all of the different areas, policy areas that we have earmarked are stretched out and implemented. So that's one way that we are doing. But in terms of actual rolling out of M&E, as far as the national TV policy, we have the metrics on how we should proceed. But in terms of actually rolling out, we have not reached that stage because we have not gotten all of the players to a common sense of consensus to deal with the standardization of the curricula and the quality assurance framework and tools. So we're still at the developmental stage as far as our TVET outlook.
So, Minister, before I forget, you just mentioned that um, the TVET administration is cut across three public institutions: the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Youth and Sport, and the Ministry of Agriculture.
Mhm.
One would say it's
Yeah.
fragmented and is one of the challenges. That's why the TVET Convention was established, or has it been established? What
Yeah.
what
So,
what is the plan for the TVET Commission? Is it established?
so no, it's not yet, not yet. So, we recognize the the growing concerns from all stakeholders. And we, in effect, I feel in the pinch of a fragmented TVET ecosystem. Um, on one hand, you want to do something. I like to give practical examples, right? So in Rivers, in one of the counties, I know my sister probably wouldn't understand. Have you been to Liberia? No, okay. So I'm sure you're from South Africa, right?
I am from Namibia, but I have done a lot of work in South Africa, yes.
In South Africa, yeah. So like
Mm,
you have different preferences. So in
mhm,
one of our preferences in county that we call county, it's called Rivers. And in Rivers, a group of young people and community town chiefs and elders wanted a TVET institution, but they were not sure where to go, whether they should go to the Ministry of Education or they should go to the
mm,
Ministry of Youth and Sport, right? So we find that often. And so they went to the Ministry of Education because they thought that TV is education. And then education sent them to the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And when we had a sit-in with them, and we realized that all of the things they are talking is education related, right? So we sent them back to the Ministry of Education, and then they got furious. Like, I mean, you guys are tossing us around at this point, right? So people, ordinary citizens who want to benefit from TV services cannot because there's not a clear delineation between the roles of the Ministry of Education and Youth and Sport, particularly as it relates to TV. So we have been arguing for a national TV commission. Is captured in as in one of the five objectives of the national TVET policy, objective one, which talks about the governance of the sector. And the only way we can ensure that we achieve at all levels of TVET, including ensuring that we implement properly quality assurance, having standardized tools, qualified teachers trained, prepare and deploy into our classrooms. And all of the 9 years around that, we have to have one central governance system. All right. So we propose the National TVET Commission. The commission is in the works. The House of Representatives passed it in last June, on 13 June 2024. The Senate is yet to concur with the bill that is before them. And so there where the hitch is at the moment, but it's a bill of national interest, and I hope that that can happen pretty soon.
Okay. We hope that can happen pretty soon. So, Sabah, can we um, pick your brain a little bit further?
Mhm.
We want to, because one of the challenges have been certification. So I remember my time with the Ministry of Labor in Liberia. So there have always been the issues of Liberian jobs be given to foreigner or jobs that Liberian can do. So I remember vividly there was this company, this concession that came and they needed weather. So one would say there are many weathers in Liberia. You can see there are many shops with printings that teach weathering, the skills to young people. And then uh, this company made a request for work permit for 20 weathers. So the minister was like, can we not find these people in Liberia? But then the company had their own standard. So they needed a certain benchmark. This weather have to be certificated. There must be some institutional certification. If not a college degree, there must be some certificate that they went through a TVET program. And that has been one of our challenges. So I would like to know from you, how can the NQF ensure consistency of skills through certification
Mm.
across all the institution?
Yeah.
How can the NQF ensures that?
Okay, so I think the question and the direct answer to it is that is exactly one of the key purposes of institutionalizing an NQF. It is to standardize not only training delivery, but assessment and certification across the board. And so, when we talk about qualifications, CBET qualifications, we talk about national occupational standards or occupational profiles. And those national occupational standards are, in essence, the benchmark for national assessment. So they already outline the criteria for assessment, which is for the purpose of certification. And so by training institutions merely complying with the occupational standard, they are already somehow in compliance with the assessment standards for that specific qualification. But notwithstanding the fact that when we talk about quality assurance mechanisms for the implementation of an NQF, we are talking about accreditation, and a subset of accreditation is that assessment standards must also be complied with. And so it is this NQF commission or TVET commissions, part of their mandate should be to develop and institutionalize assessment standards for the TVET sector. So what are the minimum standards for a person to be certified in accordance with the NQF? And institutions will have to adopt and comply with those standards. I think it is the most critical component of ensuring the credibility and integrity of a qualifications framework is to ensure that assessments are streamlined and are at requirements are adhered to ensure the integrity of the qualifications we issue. So together with, accreditation requirements, ensuring trainers are trained, we will have to also develop assessment standards or regulations. Some countries have gone the route of developing assessment regulations so that it's actually mandated and regulated to ensure the integrity of their national qualifications frameworks. But we would also have to train national assessors, moderators, and verifiers. And so these national assessors would be assessors that are external to a TVET institution. And they come in as an external assessor to assess the work or training that has taken place within the institution. That is another quality assurance mechanism that we are putting in place by ensuring that training providers are responsible for internal assessment, but national assessors are responsible for external assessment for the purposes of certification, and then also being verified by awarding bodies. So there are several steps involved in ensuring that certification is consistent, but that we also ensure that certification is aligned to the purpose of the NQF in terms of ensuring the credibility and integrity of certificates that are issued under the TVET sector.
So are there any digital tools that support that? Are there any digital
Yes,
tools?
they are, and it's coming more and more to light by the day. There are countries that have developed e-assessment platforms where learners can do their assessments online. There are also what is coming more and more to the front now, what we call micro-credentials that are being issued in a digital format. But then as, how can I say, as the primary tool for implementing a national qualifications framework to a minimum, every country must have what we call a national learner records database.
Okay.
And that national...
It's just
yes.
continue.
That national learners record database is to track the implementation of the NQF and its qualifications, to also track assessments in different and certifications in different sectors, and overall track the implementation of the NQF. But in addition to that, we can implement stuff like e-assessments and micro-credentials and other digital tools to sort of simplify assessment that leads to certification, because we are in the African context, we are talking about mostly TVET training in the informal sector. And if we want to standardize the informal sector, we have to talk about simplification of the NQF and its subsequent organs and or implementation tools. And we have to differentiate that to say that, CBET as a methodology and the NQF comes from first world countries that have very structured economies and organized private sector, whereas we are on the flip side of the coin. And so we can, yes, it's good to benchmark and it's good to look at international best practice, but we need to contextualize in accordance with our own economic structures, in accordance with what is possible and practical for our countries, and therefore look at how we can simplify assessment without necessarily compromising on the quality of our certification systems. And so, yes, digital tools are coming more and more to the front in terms of aiding access to assessment and certification. And it's definitely one thing I would recommend Liberia to look at is e-assessments and the implementation of micro-credentials as a form of certification. Thank you.
So how can we embed workplace-based learning into the NQF credential requirement, accreditation requirements? How can we?
So it starts, for me, the qualification is always your base or departure point. And if we talk about developing competency-based qualifications or national occupational standards, that qualification already prescribes the theoretical knowledge to be transferred or trained on and assess on the practical skills required for a person to attain that qualification, and also attitude, because when we talk about competency-based education and training, it includes knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And so by the mere composition of a qualification, we can already see what is the ratio in terms of theory and versus practice. And, the basic ratio for competency-based education and training is a 70-30 ratio, meaning that 70% must be practical training or learning, and only 30% must be theoretical. Now, when we develop these qualifications, across many countries and the way they develop their TVET qualifications, there is always this one requirement in a qualification that states that training needs to be implemented in a real working environment or in a simulated working environment. Now, when we look at traditional TVET, classroom-based, that is basically a simulated working environment. And when we talk about if we have to really conform to the actual requirements of that qualification, then we will see that it was in fact meant to be work-based learning, implemented in a real working environment. And so the ratio of theory versus practice will tell you how much time should be spent in work-based learning, training towards a qualification and not necessarily being employed as a person. And so when we look at the pathways for implementing a competency-based education and training qualifications, we need to determine which qualifications are more technically inclined and are appropriate for work-based learning versus which qualifications are more theoretical oriented and are more cost-effective for implementation in the traditional TVET, classroom TVET modality, but also ensuring that there is articulation between the two pathways or intervention. And so we open access and we open the doors to industry to support us in terms of training delivery and ensuring that every learner who is certified at a certain level of the NQF is actually validated through industry by adopting the work-based learning methodology. And that sort of, it ticks many boxes in terms of quality assurance, in terms of demand-driven training in the delivery of NQF qualifications. I hope that answers the question for you, Dakina, but please, I'm open for follow-ups.
Yes, that did. So we'll transition now to linking the informal apprenticeship to formal skills training. We know that is a huge population of what we are talking about when it comes to young people gaining skill in the informal apprenticeship sector. So we will shift our focus to that. I will start with you, Honorable Minister. If you can put a percentage to how many young people that are gaining skill through the informal apprenticeship, and how can we leverage um, that group of people?
So the data on that will be understated, but as far as the ministry's own effort
Mm.
to enhance apprenticeship for learners in the TVET space was done through a partnership with the Mercy Cups, international nonprofit organization between 2018 to 2023. And data show that as part of the program launch, youth on the job training were basically meant for young people in economically challenged and slum communities within Montserrado and the rural parts of Montserrado. And they were doing a 250 every 6 months over a period of 5 years, the program that ran for 5 years. So we're annually impacting the lives of 500 young people a year. So it's pretty um, around 2,000, 3,000 in terms of number. But
Okay.
when paired in comparison with the overall number of young people that actually need this level of push and cushion, it is infinitesimal. So more focus have to be driven to nationally driven programs, national apprenticeship programs that can have a larger pool of young people benefiting. We note with particular interest that not all young people want to go to traditional TVET institutions. Not all young people want to do learning, classroom-based learning. And so when paired with employers who are already mastery of the particular craftment that they have, it makes it easier because pairing these young people study have shown that based on the program indicators, they've shown that in 6 months' time, these kids are able to be at least proficient in those areas. So yeah, it's a focus for us to now move into a nationally driven apprenticeship program as opposed to programs, pocket-sized programs that are piloted by nonprofit organizations.
Thanks, Minister Youngton. Seba, how can we balance keeping the strength of traditional master apprentice system with that of increasing standardization? Because the NQF will increase standardization. So how can we, balance in keeping that with the strength of the master apprentice system?
Yeah, I think this is a very critical question that deserves a lot of attention. More often you will hear people speak of formalizing the informal sector. And that is completely wrong because it does not only take skills development systems to formalize an informal sector. And by no means do they really want to be formalized. There is a reason why they are operating outside of the system. And there's a reason why they are growing at a faster pace than organized private sector. And so what we should actually be doing is to learn from the informal sector on how we can keep systems flexible, experiential, and hands-on learning that takes place within informal apprenticeships. And it happens with such ease that, we can't even say how these master craftspersons are able to transfer their skills and knowledge in such a short of time in a very cost-effective manner. And so one thing we need to do is to learn from them how this is done, and from that learning develop minimum standards that they already in some form or shape are able to achieve and comply with. The second thing is to maintain the role and the identification of the master craftsperson and develop national occupational standards in accordance with what they are already teaching. There is no use in developing a standard that nobody can meet. And so the departure point should be what they already know and what they can already teach. And then in terms of quality assurance is to be as flexible and inclusive as possible, looking at the different sectors and how the informal sector operates within different sectors, and allowing for that flexibility in terms of compliance to any quality assurance mechanism and or supporting framework in terms of implementing the NSQF. And then also, when we are developing the NQF and its qualifications, it is very important to, from the onset, align it to career pathways. And by developing career pathways, we allow for progression within the NQF from one level to the next and from one occupation to the next. And so the NQF, therefore, one of its key purposes is to allow for horizontal and vertical articulation, meaning that if we are articulating vertically, it means that we are also accommodating emerging industries, because then, for instance, let me use an example. In Southern Africa, the topic of green hydrogen is now very much on the top of the agenda of all governments and development agencies. And so it is an emerging industry for Africa. We can't say that we have skilled people to just push into that labor market and start, performing their jobs. So we had to look at what are the foundational skills that these people have and what can we use as an existing qualification to build upon. And what was very interesting that came out of that skills gap analysis is that your general electrician can articulate into the green hydrogen sector. Your general air conditioner can articulate into the green hydrogen sector. Your general instrumentation and control technician can articulate into the green hydrogen sector. Even water treatment technicians can articulate into the green hydrogen sector. And so by developing these career pathways from the onset, you are already anticipating articulation into other sectors and or industries and or occupations. And I think, it is important that once we develop a system that is very much formed on the basis of how informal apprenticeships work, and then aligning it to the minimum quality criteria for an NQF to operate, and distinguishing what the perfect balance is between maintaining existing structures and developing in line with international best practice, then we cannot go wrong. But I think, the involvement and participation of master craftspersons in structuring and framing the framework for apprenticeships is key in maintaining that traditional and cultural balance and ensuring that master craftspersons can be used as a tool to transfer knowledge in a way that aligns to the qualifications framework.
Uh, are there any rates, whether short or long term, uh, that we should anticipate, or existing rates that will alienate um, um, the master um, apprenticeship practitioners with the rollout of the NQF?
I'm sorry,
Did
Kina,
you get
I
the
think
question?
you
I
repeat the
said,
question for
did.
me.
Are there any known rates? Are you hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any known
Yes.
rates that we should expect with this NQF rollout that might alienate the master, class practitioner, the master apprenticeship practitioner? Are there any new rates?
I can't give you any rates because it differs from country to country and also from economic structure to economic structure and the scale of at which we are piloting and scaling up. And if we decide, to pilot within one sector and then scale up to all sectors, or pilot in a combination of sectors and then scale, but it also depends on the existing knowledge and skills of the master craftsperson. And so there is a need for a needs analysis, a baseline assessment to understand the current skills and competencies of the master craftsperson and to what level it equates on the NQF. And that will be a starting point for us. What can shorten the duration of rolling out the NQF and its implementation as it pertains to informal apprenticeships and the modernization of that is the concept of recognition of prior learning, which is enabled through the NQF. So if we put recognition of prior learning as, at the heart of standardization for the informal sector, then it will allow us to firstly and more importantly recognize the skills of the master craftsperson and equate that to a level on the NQF. And that will tell us to what extent we are able to roll out NQF qualifications in an informal apprenticeship modality. And which qualifications needs to be developed in which sectors. In itself, it is a labor market analysis that can be used from the supply side and then be sort of compared versus the demand side to determine priority areas for implementation and national rollout of the NQF.
How important is the RPL, the recognition of prior
Oh,
learning?
it is something that we as African countries cannot do without. It is the reason why most people are working in the informal sector and are either or underemployed. It has no correlation to the level of experience and expertise in performing a job or a task. And so recognition of prior learning is the only mechanism that is enabled through an NQF that can validate a person's knowledge and skills and equate it to a level on the NQF, and therefore promote decent employment. Because the NQF also helps us to equate qualification to actual occupations and positions within the labor market. And those positions comes with the salary scale. And so, in effect, it brings the supply and demand together. And through recognition of prior learning, we can undo previous injustices in terms of access to education and training and access to jobs. And it is the only mechanism for validating the experience and competence of master craftspersons that are operating in the informal sector and using them as a mechanism to formally validate the skills of apprentices that go through their systems.
Thanks, thanks. That was a very extensive answer. Minister Yilton, Mr. Yilton,
Yes.
what are the incentive that can encourage informal sector um, actors to participate in formal certification system?
Well, I'll tell you that the LERC, the Liberia Electric City Regulatory Authority, right, came up with a regulation. So in Liberia, quite a few times I faced with incident of fire
Mm-hmm.
in homes, and they did a small study and realized that a lot of that is attributed to the fight that electricians that move into these homes are doing substandard wiring. And so along with the ministry, they decided that they would set up a kind of qualification framework and certification, right? So those who are already in the field of electricity that are working um, can now go through this process of certification through them, right? Um, and you will only have to come back to any recognized TVET institution of learning that offers electricity, whose curriculum has been validated nationally, and do a prep up. And then based on that, you can sit the licensing test by the LERC, and once you have it, you can now operate as a certified electrician. Okay, this is new in this sector, but it can be replicated in other spaces like the environmental space, like the agriculture space, and you name it. And so that could be a form of encouragement because most people who are under this label of recognition of prior learners are already in the sector, in the informal sector. They're already making money. They do not see the need to go back and sit in the classroom for 3 months refresher to get certification. So something has to be tied with it. Sector specific regulators will have to come together and create a kind of mechanism through which we can drive an incentive around them. But that was a classic example that I thought to share.
So, foundation on that, how
Mhm.
can local association help in the standardization of training within the informal sector?
So it's first to recognize them
Right.
by sector regulators
Mm-hmm.
and bring them to the table at the formative stage of whatever regulation. Um, for us in Liberia right now, we have validated this document, the recognition of prior learner document. Once Yes, we've just validated it and we're about to roll it out. So it will help us not to just do it in a vacuum, but we'll work with sector specific regulator like the LERC that we just talked about. We are rolling it out with the EPA as well as the Liberia Petroleum Regulatory Authority as well. So these different regulators have a whole list of different organizations quality organizations. They have different professional bodies that they are working with and who have massive membership across the country. Okay, so you can bring these folks on the table and say, this is the new way we are going as far as recognition of prior learners. And these are the incentives that they are able to now recourse with TVET training providers that offered training or refresher training in their specific areas and fields.
Government and other actors that providing support in the sector work together to upgrade informal workshop into recognized training site. Because you look across the country, just driving from here to Banga, you will see a number of training sites, mechanic shop where people are being trained. How can the support system work together in upgrading these workshops into recognized training site?
So we through the youth on the job training, we came to realize that most of these training institutions are in first. Most of these mechanic shop, for example, haven't even registered. So for government to do formal structural engagement with you, it means that you must, first of all, be registered, you have tax paying business. So it makes it a little difficult to get them into the mainstream. What we have been encouraging them to do is to formalize this level of engagement. You must just be able to just keep your books up to date and regular. That's one aspect. The second aspect is our move, and it's a little centric, is our move to ensure that most of our training institutions are now having workshops of their own. So if we're offering mechanic, we have mechanic workshop. Um, if we are offering carpentry, we have carpentry workshop. And the goal is long term to turn these workshops into income generating revenue source for the institution so that they can sustain themselves over a period of time. And the very student that are there becomes staff of these workshops and are able to work immediately the prep line out of the institution. So that's another approach that we have been taking in quite a few years.
Have you experienced any cultural resistance beyond the regular requirement of registration fees, etc.? Have you experienced cultural resistance to formal certification in the informal sector?
I would say that people are still glued to their community, like
Yeah.
more, and I will give a practical example with those who most of the people who are informally running mechanic shops are mainly Mandingos, and okay, so they would rather if you're doing apprenticeship, they would rather you bringing one or two of their kinsmen as opposed to people from other tribe, right? So we have experienced that to a larger scale. So the scale up to that could be even much higher if we are nationally moving into the direction of national apprentice program because you go to places like Nima and you want to send someone from Grand Bassa to Nima to do apprenticeship, it's more than unlikely that that will happen because the regional imbalance and all of the different stuff that will interplay that will come to play. So and to a larger extent, this span back to our history, and you know that Kina, the 14 years conflict we've had have never resolved the issue of people and tribe and region. All right, and some people are still holding clinch to it along the way. And it showcase in every aspect of our lives, including the informal sector.
Yeah, most definitely. Uh, Sabel, let me cycle to you. So we have talked a lot about the informal apprenticeship and how can we formalize them. So what international model of formal or informal apprenticeship integration could Liberia adopt if you want to advise?
Mm. You know, I'm a little bit conflicted with this question, but I will answer to the best of my ability. I think the world knows and
Maybe,
recognizes.
so maybe you can answer by
Sorry, can I proceed?
so maybe you can answer by telling us what are the models out there.
So I think the world knows and recognizes this for and it is a very spectacular model with significant positive results. But I am a little bit careful in just promoting it to the African continent because of the
Can you just recycle? You are breaking.
Okay. Can you hear me properly now?
Yes, yes, we
All
can.
right.
Thank you.
So I started off by saying that I think the world knows and recognizes the successes of the German dual or cooperative model for apprenticeships. And
Mhm.
yes, it is a very good model and one to definitely use as best practice when benchmarking. But because of the differences in economic structures between first world countries and specifically Germany in comparison with any other African country, it is not something that can just be adopted as is. Yes, there are good concepts and mechanisms that can be benchmarked and leveraged and adapted to suit the needs of our individual countries and its economic structure. But I do believe that the ILO recommendation to 208 is a very well crafted document which serves as a guideline for the implementation of apprenticeships globally. And, Namibia has recently embarked on this process of developing regulations for the implementation of apprenticeship and also industrial attachment as part of traditional TVET delivery. And the ILO recommendation was found to be the most user friendly and adaptable a guideline to use for countries because it provides guidance in terms of generics and not economic specific or country specific context. And so, it is adaptable and it can be customized in accordance with the country's own needs and structures and also, not just economic structures, but also educational and TVET structures. And so I think, to start off, we can look at different countries to benchmark. Namibia has benchmarked against Ireland because of its ability to integrate the informal sector in apprenticeships. And Turkey as well. And then obviously, and other countries are known to be best practice for apprenticeship, which is Singapore, Germany, and even Scotland. So also we've benchmarked against Mauritius to look at what they are doing. But ultimately, what we have found is that the ILO recommendation on apprenticeship is the best guideline or framework to use. And to customize that in terms of local realities and local structures in terms of quality assurance within the TVET sector.
Okay, thank you. I want to remind our participant, you can post your question in the question and answer tab, and then we'll read out to our panelists, and they will address them. So you could do that, begin to do that, and at the ending of the conversation, we'll read out some of these questions if we have the time to engage our panelists. So let's cycle to the Agriculture TVET. Yes. So infusing Agriculture TVET is one of the important discussion on the TVET sector. Minister Yonton, agriculture is not for say almost 60 or 70% of our economic activity, driving work activities in the country, and it has a huge youth participation, given the fact that 60% of our population is under the age 25 or below. How can Liberia reposition agriculture as a model of technology to drive career options for youth people?
Well, so I'll pick you back to the years, the Madam Salif years, and there were a whole host of young people graduating from high schools and not seeing agriculture as a pathway. So there was a cluster of them in the labor arts, doing management and sociology and you name it. Uh, what the government did at the time was to reiterate and incentivize the agriculture and the teaching space. So they were giving direct incentive, monthly stipend to the students who were signing up to do agriculture and to do teaching. I think we can also do that because if you look at the ambitious feed yourself plan that have been launched by the current government, of which I'm a part of,
Yeah.
is towering around over 700 million. All right. So with direct investment in agriculture through the use of cooperative, but I'm sure that we can move from just having farmers move from subsistence farming to mechanized. And this, I think, is the direction that we need to go. Specifically with our TVET long-term strategy, we have arable farm line under the Ministry of Youth and Sports. In Bombing, we have over 200 acre. In Bon County, we have over 150 acre in Sinod. So these are geographically significant to boosting workforce in agriculture, but also new farmers, young farmers that can be pipeline. So we are tailoring on the idea and the theory of change that if we use these counties in different regions to grow what we eat, like rice and maize and cassava, all right, and have this farm produce it, right? We have experimental farms attached to each of our agricultural training centers. All right, we will be producing and it's real practical. We are still importing pepper, all right, from Guinea. And
Mhm.
we have this huge 200, 150 acre of land in Bon County. If we're growing pepper in Bon County, for example, using student farmers, we can supply Nima, we can supply Magibi, we can supply Montserrado, where Rail Light is a major commercial hub. All right, and we can supply quite a few other counties. All right, so this is our outlook. We are also expanding our current donor pools. So we are welcoming more partnership and investment into TVET, Agro TVET, not on the grant mentality, because the grant mentality reduces you to understanding that TVET is not a space for critical investment where you can have return on your investment. So we are now relooking TVET in the way that you can invest in TV just as you can invest in the extractive industry and have critical returns on the investment. And one of such, we are at the verge of signing an MOU with a company from Netherlands that is
Okay.
particularly concerned about mechanization, production, and training, but also bringing in high-tech agricultural equipment on assignment. And so we use one of our center in central Liberia as a hub where the assembling of those tractors and other agricultural equipment will be done right there. And we are training around 200 young people annually into assembling and maintenance of those equipment. So these are ways that I think we can get more young people encouraged based on
Okay.
new partnerships and based on
Mhm.
new curricula that can be developed over a period of time.
So how can Agriculture Extension Services partner with TVET institution to reinforce applied learning?
I think the best way is not to isolate. Most of the Ministry of Agriculture Extension officers do not even have not even visited TVET institution, agricultural TVET institutions in their county. They have not been engaged in terms of just formal program. You write out to them and send communication to attend programs. So this basic thing. I think the first way is a sense of recognition that this institution exists and whatever they are doing, this institution can serve as a cushion to support their activities. But yeah, the first way is the recognition and having the flexibility and the willingness to open up for conversation, discussion along the partnership lines.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minister. Sabiel, let me cycle to you. What agriculture trade should Liberia prioritize under the Agri-TVET
Mm,
approach from your
okay.
experience?
Yeah. So from my experience as it pertains to ATVET, we have one critical problem. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it also is the same for Liberia, but agriculture is one of the traditional trades in most African countries because it is what fed us and sustained our livelihoods for a very long time. And so
Right.
most youth do not consider it a decent job, but rather
Mhm.
a chore, right? A household chore. And so by promoting ATVET, we have to be very smart in how we develop these qualifications, what type of qualifications we develop, and what career guidance mechanisms we are using to attract youth and get them interested in wanting to train or get qualified in agriculture. And so I think, one of some of the critical traits that we need to look at, and not just for Liberia, but for the whole African continent, is how can we develop qualifications within the agricultural sector, but that are that are technologically aligned to where we are in terms of technology, in terms of climate and ECGS indicators and frameworks, but also in terms of how can we make an occupation more interesting within the
Mhm.
agricultural sector so that today's youth and millennials and generation or Gen Z wants to study towards that. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is like climate smart crop production.
Yes.
It's just not your average crop production. It's aligned to international initiatives and imperatives in terms of carbon lowering our carbon emission. But then also looking at digital extension support technicians, right? I mean, extension technicians has been an occupation or profession for millennia, but it's still an area or subset of agriculture that we are struggling with till today. And so I think, we need to move with the trends in terms of technological advancements and look at how we can modernize some of the trades and occupations of the agricultural sector. So if we look at extension support services, if we digitalize that and use technology, it becomes an ICT course as opposed to agriculture, but it specializes in the agricultural field. And so then you have this vertical articulation between ICT and agriculture as well. Um, and I think we have to also then look at agro processing and value addition. But most importantly, I think, um, is to look at mechanization and farm equipment operator. There are also, in terms of technology, a lot of advancements in the field. So I think we first need to study where we.
Okay, so I was saying, why do many TVET graduates struggle to sustain small enterprise after training? And how can advisory services close this gap?
I think there is an overarching need for advisory services. Unfortunately, we do
Mhm.
not have a lot of institutions that are netted and embedded in providing those services, except it it comes through some donor funding that provide these technical services. But it is necessary for not just TVET graduates, but generally young people who aspires to moving into small, medium enterprises, that sector as a whole, which is a feeder for a lot of employment opportunities for the economy, to have some form of advisory services. We and as far as that, we have introduced in most of our TVET institution entrepreneurship curricula because we realized that that was lacking to a
Mhm.
larger extent for a whole host of young people who went through the TVET space and were graduating and wanting to start their own business field in either 6 months or the first year of operations. And so we realized that it was a course, it was a curriculum that was in demand. And one of the things we teach is, in fact, basic things like how to separate your personal finance from your business finance, all right? Financial literacy, which is very key for anyone who's in business. What are the different requirements depending on the sector that you want to get involved with? Legal and regulatory requirements that you have to do to meet. What are some of the things that you need to do as far as scaling up your business to have the kind of traction for access to finance with commercial banks? But on the larger scale, the government has been working with the African Development Bank, and that's bring us to the conversation around some of the things we've been doing.
Yeah.
The African Development Bank quite recently launched a program called Youth Entrepreneurial Investment Bank. And the
Mm-hmm.
bank is in two folds. The first is the technical aspect of the bank, that along with the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Youth and Sports, to serve on the technical steering committee, is to provide these services that you're talking about. So whether you're a
Okay.
young person graduating from a TVET space, or you're a young person who have graduated from high school or college and just generally have an aspiration of venturing in any of the sector of growth in Liberia, you have dedicated professional people who can help you, give you the technical guidance that you need to start your own business. And then the second is the access to finance part, where we have a lot of our young people who start business but cannot raise the level of collateral that commercial banks are requiring. And so we provide, as a government, stand in that gap as collateral for those small businesses that will be pipeline. The program has been launched. We're looking forward to working all of the technical details behind the
Thanks.
scene. And by early next year, we can have young people benefiting.
Okay, so Minister, let's just take two questions from the chat from our participant. I think most of the questions are directed to you. I will take the first question from Veronica Yanti, and the question reads, Mr. Minister, what are your plans to partnership with other institutions that are privately running but focus on a special vocational and technical education like uh, Sabina, who focus is on the travel and tourism sector, understanding that the government can do all and has not developed any program for such, and there are Liberians who have the passion for that, and we have an institution serving as the bridge to such. What are your plans in partnering with such institution? I think she's talking about I think airline training or air something.
Yeah, so the tourism sector is a fast growing sector.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Liberia quite recently established the National Tourism Authority. Um, in partnership with the European Union, there is the first tourism technical institution that will be built. The plan, the BOQ for the entire plan and the building has been finalized, and it's going to be built in Grand Cape Mount County in Robertsport specifically. And it's going to be like your first tourism, technical tourism institution of learning. As far as plan for partnering with private TVET providers, what is in um, air travels and tourism or in any sector, we are moving to a space where we can begin having conversation around providing subsidies for private TVET institutions that meet a certain benchmark to be able to subsidize them. And if you're able to go through your overhead cost and we are able to provide subsidy that can afford to take in additional number of students. And so the social contract around that is that you have to benefit an X number of students. We're reaching that because if you look at how the Ministry of Youth and Sports budget is structured from the youth development and empowerment, and we have youth organizations like the YMCA, the YWCA, the Federation of Liberian Youth, and these statutory youth organizations getting subsidies from government. So we can do the same for the TVET ecosystem so that private providers that have the passion and are struggling financially can receive some level of subsidy, but at the same time, that subsidy can be used to enroll increased number of students who technically really cannot afford, and the government will be verging on in terms of that partnership with. So it's a conversation that we are placing on the table with the key policymakers from the
Mhm.
Ministry of Finance, our national legislature that are there, and so let's see how it goes. But it's something that we have in store for private to create to enhance partnership with private TV providers.
So time is fast spent. We're already running ahead of time. Let's take the last question from the chat and then we close. The rest of the questions will be forwarded to our panelists. They will address them and they will address the questions. So just one more question, Mr. Minister, before we close. This one is from Joseph Joma. He says, TVET system falls short because of underinvestment, outdated equipment, insufficient teacher training, and poor alignment with labor market needs. What are some steps that the government through the Ministry of Youth and Sport is taking towards those challenges? I think we addressed this.
Yeah, I will just briefly just go over it. The first thing
Yeah.
is that we realize that um, most of the most of the gaps we have as far as trainers weren't people who traditionally were in that space. And through the partnership with the EU, we launched the Youth Rising Project, and we were looking at sending people abroad in places like Ghana, in places like Kenya, in places like South Africa for
Mhm.
specialized training. But that model is not sustainable. And so we decided now for the first time that just as we have teacher training colleges across the country, there was an overarching need for us to have our first Taylor TVET teacher training institution. And we launched that in 2018. So now, rather than sending people abroad, we are now pipelining an army of TVET instructors that are ready. So yes, we grapple with that in the beginning, but as we are moving on, you're realizing that we are deploying more qualified TVET instructors across the country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister. So distinguished panelists, participant in Friends of Leicester Liberia, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to our panelists, Honorable Laraman Shakin Yutan. I want to say thank you very much, and Ms. Sebel Ferres for sharing their expertise, insight, and practical recommendations on building educational pathway to jobs. You know, your contribution have provided us with a wealth of knowledge and actionable ideas that we can that can help shape Liberia workforce for the future. Again, we want to say thank you for accepting our invitation, and we will always be knocking on your door when the need be. I also want to thank all participants for your insightful and thought-provoking questions. Though some of the questions weren't addressed, but those questions will be forwarded to our participant, and they will be addressed. What we do at Nestle Liberia is um, we will consolidate the key insight, recommendations, and discussion point from today's webinar and into a white paper. So that white paper will be circulated to all participants, shortly in the coming days, and then we hope this document will serve as a practical resource for guiding policy programs design and implementation for TVET and skills development space. Again, we say thank you, and we look forward to yet another thought-provoking webinar for December as we close the year. Thanks again for coming, and a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you,
Uh,
Dakina. Thank you, Minister. It was
Oh,
lovely to be here.
yeah, you dropped off.
Yes, apologies for that. I tried to get back on as soon as possible.
That's okay.
uh,
So
Yes.
we have some questions in the chat room. So we
Mhm.
already passed our time limit. So those questions will be forwarded, and then you can help address some of the questions from the participant, and then
Yes.
we'll consolidate all the recommendation, the insight into a white paper, and that white paper will be circulated.
No problem. I am at your service. And thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here today and to share my